Ghana has started to soak in the riches of the Jubilee oil field. And yet the world out there sneers and tells us that we are heading for an economic Armageddon. Having mapped out a sensible path for the judicious use of our petrodollars, we appear to have quickly found ourselves in choppy waters and gale force storms of uncontrollable misuse of our economic hope for years to come. Early symptoms of the dreaded Dutch disease, of deepening poverty in the midst of thickening oil wealth, are showing up, and we'll do well to get an early diagnosis and an effective treatment before it turns into a deadly plague. Good evening and welcome to Tarzan's Take. As the revenues from the Jubilee oil field continues to add to our national wealth and moves us into a supposedly middle income status, we must find answers to the two core questions, namely, 1, how much is our oil wealth really worth, and what are we spending all that money on? And secondly, why is our oil wealth failing to make any positive impact on the lives of Ghanaians, and at the same time, lowering global confidence in Ghana's creditworthiness and attractiveness as an investment destination? My guests tonight are two people who are probably the best equipped to assist us to become better informed and also to get the best answers to the questions that I've posed. Mr. Kwabena Buadu Oku Afari is the Chief Economics Officer and the Director, the Real Sector Division, Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. My second guest, Mr. Muhammad Amin Adam, who I call ANTA, is the Executive Director for the Africa Center for Energy Policy. We'll have a short break, after which we'll get stuck into the second and final conversation on our two-part series, Pouring Oil Over Troubled Waters. See you after the break. Welcome back. Last week, we looked at how much oil that we really do have and how quickly can we get them out. We have some very good ideas as to where we shall be 10 years from now, both in terms of oil and gas. Today, we want to know how much is all of this worth in terms of real dollars that are translated into cedis that are meant to improve our lives. I have one guest from last week joining us, Mohammed Adam, of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. They have had a special interest in Ghana's oil wealth and what we should be doing with it. My new guest tonight is Kwabena Buadu Oku Afari. He's Chief Economics Officer and Director of the Real Sector Division. I asked him whether there was a director for the fake sector division, but we haven't gotten there yet. But he's from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. They are responsible for the collection and accounting for the use of our oil wealth. So we'll start off this conversation by trying to establish how much have we actually earned from oil since we started production in 2010. Oku, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I have got some numbers from your budgets and things like that, but I think that, as they say, if the man is really here, let's hear it from the horse's mouth. So tell us, from 2010, since we started production, how much money has come into our coffers? And if you have any comments as he brings out the numbers, don't hesitate to jump in so that we arrive at a consensus as to how much money. I have also got some figures I picked from the various budgets, but I'm hoping that the beginning of our conversation, we should all be on the same page as to how much money are we talking about. So from the Ministry of Finance, the Real Sector Director, please tell us how much you've earned.
Thank you. I think Tarzan is very much interested in the real sector,
yes.
what it is. But we have a lot of divisions in the ministry. But in terms of financial programming, we have 4 sectors of the economy. We have the fiscal sector, you have the real sector, we have the monetary sector, and then you have the external sector. All these work together to bring the economy together. And I am in charge of the real sector. Real sector is just that I deal with, my division deals with tangible issues in terms of growth, in terms of energy resources, in terms of agriculture, in terms of industry, the things that go
the reality.
Yes.
The reality.
That is it.
Not on the other hand and on the left hand, but the real numbers.
Yeah.
Not growth rate estimates that you can't keep. So
well.
The real.
In economics, we will always have the left hand and the right hand. So
what about the 100 economists? What do we do with them?
We will teach them how to do
it. So you are the real sector.
Yes.
The tangibles.
Yes.
The numbers.
Yes.
Tell us the numbers about oil wealth then.
Okay. Let me make a correction. We started producing oil actually in 2011, even though the production. We started sometime in November, December.
President Mills cut the sword in December 2010.
Yeah. Yes,
if I remember.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm coming to. That we started the production in 2010, the end of 2010. That was in December. But the money started flowing in 2011.
Okay.
So for our records, we record inflows for starting from 2011.
Real money.
Yes, real money.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for up to the end of September 2013, as we reported in the budget statement, the total amount that we have recorded as inflows from oil is 1,693 2,600 324. If I should shorten it, 1.7 billion US dollars.
Yes, up to the end of September 2013.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, and it translates into cedis depending on the exchange rate that you use. I'm using official exchange rate too. So if you want to convert, you may not get exactly the same thing that I'm going to give.
But do we use Malam rates for these things?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's official.
Yeah, it amounts to about 1.027 billion cedis, Ghana cedis.
3 or 1?
3.027 billion. That is about $1.7 billion translates into 3.027 billion Ghana cedis. So that's what our records show that we have. And it is made up of liftings in terms of oil money that we've got, in terms of royalties, in terms of corporate income tax, in terms of surface rentals, in terms of I think these are the main items. Equity financing revenue that we have. These are the components of it.
Just modify this for me, because I also read from the budget that even your estimates for the end of the year was going to be about 1.54 billion for this year alone.
Yes.
And then for next year, you projected around 780 million for oil revenue.
That's right.
Okay, so
I
just wanted to get that clear, that you're expecting a lot more money in the last quarter.
Sure. In fact, if I should be clear on this, I'm reporting up to the end of September.
That's right.
But even as we speak, there has been a 15th lifting, which is going to give us about $100 million or so. So we already have it, and we are still doing the distribution. The monies have hit government account, but as at now, we are reporting on the real monies that have come as at the end of September.
Let's remain founded in reality.
Yes.
Do you agree with those numbers?
Yes, I agree with the numbers, except that what I have to say is that the Ministry of Finance itself has announced recently they've learned their lessons as far as projecting oil revenues are concerned, because except this year, 2013, we have had difficulties meeting the projections that we made for oil revenues.
I understand that has been because we've been producing at far lower levels than...
Yes, in 2011, there was actually a problem, which was caused by us as a result of our lack of understanding of the industry and the tricks of the oil companies. Government had projected that we were to get about $400 million in corporate taxes for 2011, but that didn't come in because of carry-forward losses. But what brought about the losses was because the Jubilee partners started production in 2010, at the end of 2010. And according to our petroleum income tax law, the recovery, cost recovery, begins from the year of commencement of production. And so even though they started at the tail end of the year, they were, supposed to have recovery for that year. And therefore, they had to carry it forward to 2011 as a loss.
We'll come back. So we're not quibbling about the numbers. We are all agreed on
the numbers. We are okay.
We're okay on the numbers. Lovely. Real director, tell us how we are supposed to divide this money up and how we have actually divided it up.
Okay, the petroleum revenue is actually governed by the PRMA. The PRMA is the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Mm-hmm. And this was passed in 2011, Act 815, in April 2011. And that governs how we should spend the oil money, how the money should be accounted for, and how we should account for its use as well. And the law makes provision for the creation of what we call petroleum funds. And the Ghana Petroleum Fund is supposed to receive all the money that comes from oil, that's from petroleum. And if you say petroleum money, it involves so many things. I've talked about royalties, I've talked about income tax, corporate tax, I've talked about dividend, I've talked about our equity share, the profit that we get from investing in the oil. And there is a formula that we are expected to use to divide this money.
The formula is in the Act?
It's in the Act. Okay. The formula is in the Act. So far, we've gone strictly by the Act, even though we have problems with some aspects of it. Unless the law is reviewed, we will go strictly by the law.
Going strictly by the Act and the law, tell us where the money goes. For the purposes of our viewers and Ghanaians in general, where does the money go? Give us the headings under which and how much of the money we put under each heading.
The money is supposed to go to, part of it is supposed to go to the National Oil Company.
GMPC.
GMPC, as at now. That is the only national oil company that we have. So part of the money goes to them. The GMPC does certain things for government. In the first place...
No, let's get the proportions first. We'll go into the details later. So how much goes to GMPC?
In terms of proportion, it's difficult to say proportion because there is what we call the equity financing costs. GMPC is supposed to invest on behalf of government. But because government doesn't have ready money, what we do is that the Jubilee partners fund the cost of our portion for us.
No. Before I get into those details, there's a formula. The formula apportions the money into stabilization. Can you give me those headings and how much the formula says they should have?
Yeah.
Just for clarity.
I'm difficult to give that portion because the amount that goes into equity financing costs is not.
Okay. Let's start.
There's no formula on that.
Let's start it from the other way. How much goes into consolidated fund? Give me the headings. There's something called consolidated fund that we all know. There's a stabilization.
Okay, we have the ABF, that is annual budget funding amount. And the annual budget funding amount is calculated net of the equity financing costs that we take out to GMPC. Mm-hmm. And then out of the annual budget, including the annual budget funding amount, we have the stabilization fund.
That comes out of the ABSA.
No, it doesn't come
from it. That's a different thing altogether.
It doesn't come from it.
Yeah.
We have three components. We have the ABFA, that is the annual budget funding amount. We have the stabilization fund, and then we have the heritage fund. The heritage fund and the stabilization fund together is what we call the Ghana Petroleum Funds. There are two of them. And in addition to that, we have the annual budget funding amount, which is the amount that goes into the budget to fund the budget.
Now, no, you see, it's important for the discussion as to whether we're spending our money well or not to get an idea of the proportions. Can you help us out with how much is going to stabilization, how much is going into heritage, how much is APFA? Or do we get to the GMPC and then divide the rest? Or are there numbers to this?
Yeah, we take GMPC out first.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, actually, when you receive the annual revenues, the GMPC's allocation for equity financing is predetermined because we know the cost of development and we know the share of the cost that is taken by the various parties. That
predetermination, is this a certain percentage of the revenue, or it's a global nominal sum, a fixed sum?
No, it depends on how much our liability as a nation is, as far as developing the fields were concerned. And therefore, it is apportioned. Just as we have to allow them to recover their cost, 20% annually for 5 years, we are also supposed to pay our cost every year.
You see, I'm getting confused. Yes. I'm behaving like the man on the what do you call it? The trotro going to Medina. Real director has said we have earned $1.7 billion US. 3-point-something billion cedis. Now, before I get into whether we are spending the money well or not, I think Ghanaians need to know that 3-point-something billion, how has it been divided up?
Yes.
I think we need to get some idea of that.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at the hard figures.
That's what I want to know.
To look at, first of all,
the
how
principle.
the division is and the principle.
Exactly, yes.
And so you have annual receipts. Part is given to the GMPC for two purposes. One, for their equity financing. That is predetermined. But the second one, the law says not more than 55% of the net carried and participating interest. But the Minister of Finance...
What does that mean in the ordinary English?
Yes, I mean, in the contract that we signed with the oil companies, Ghana has a share which includes a carried interest which is free, and therefore 10% is given to Ghana free through exploration and through development. The second one is a paid interest. That is also a participating interest, but for this one, we pay for it. And as far as the Jubilee field is concerned, it's about 3.75%. And so
that's GMPC's input into the development cost.
Yes.
Okay.
And so when we were supposed to have financed ours, we didn't have the money.
I understand that one.
So it is already known how much our liability is.
I've got a number out of you. That's what I needed. 3.7% is our development.
Not really. The development cost is not 3.75. It's the
I'm talking about the share, the participating interest.
That's what belongs to us.
Yes.
But the cost, that's what we have to pay for.
Yeah, the development cost, we don't pay, for the 10%, but we pay for the 3.75%.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the 10% is our jara for letting people come in to take our oil away.
Yes.
And the 3.75 is what they pre-finance, and we have to pay.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. We're getting there.
Yeah. And they pre-finance to the tune of $166 million.
And do they charge us interest on the pre-finance?
They charge interest.
You see, Ghanaians need to know. You see, somebody is sitting somewhere, says, Charlie, we've got 1.7 billion. Now, we must...
Let me make a short correction.
Yes.
Originally the amount, the percentage was 3.75, but every year I think they do a revision. So now it's about 3.64.
Okay.
Yeah. So
we won't quibble about those little decimals, but at least we know that we are having to pay some development cost.
Yes.
Good. So then you said a figure of 55%. What is that one?
Yeah. The law says that after you deduct the equity financing, which is our liability, what is left in respect of the carried and participating interest.
55% of that will go to GMPC.
Not more than 55% of that should go to the GMPC.
Fantastic.
But the Minister of Finance consistently has gone to Parliament to ask for a lower percentage.
I know you have several issues, but I want us first of all to understand.
Okay.
Good. So we've paid all these things. 55% has gone to GMPC.
But it hasn't gone to GMPC.
No.
Because actually 40% has been going to GMPC.
Mohammed.
Yes. Okay.
I will come to that.
Okay.
I want us to know what should go. 55% should go.
Yes.
And how much should go to the APFA?
And so what is left,
should go
together with the royalty,
okay,
and the corporate taxes that we collect, and the rental, fees that we collect, then becomes what we call benchmark revenue. Now, the benchmark revenue is then divided between the budget and the petroleum funds.
Good. Now, let me stop you there and come to the real director. If you read the budget and you look at the table showing sources of our revenues, those tables give real numbers of contributions from the oil wealth. In the tables, 20-something to whatever, they give real numbers. Can you just, under the various categories, if you have the numbers, tell us what they are for 2013 and what they are expected? Because they constitute for part of the revenue, which is later shared, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get some idea of what we expect to get from oil this. Well, okay, what we got up to the third quarter and how it has been made up in terms of the various headings you've talked about.
Okay, I've given the total amount that we have received so far. The components of the oil receipts are royalties.
Yeah.
And royalties have so far yielded about 423 million US dollars. That translates into about 749, let me say 750 million Ghana cedis. We also have the carried and participating interest. The carried and participating interest is the amount that we receive for participating our shares in the oil production. We have to get money for it. That has given us so far about 1.1 billion US dollars.
Is that the thing between 3.6 and 3.75? That interest?
Yes.
Including the free
including
one.
the 10%.
The 10%.
So in all, it's about 13.64.
Fantastic.
The 13.64 is what gives us that amount.
That's good stuff. We are now getting to know where all our oil money is coming from.
And that translates into about 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. We also have the corporate income taxes, and that is charged at the rate of 35%. And that so far has given us 172 million US dollars, which translates into about 331 million Ghana cedis.
Is this charged on the gross worth of the oil or after production costs? On profit?
It's on profit.
Lovely. Okay.
Yeah. And then we also have surface rentals. Surface rentals, that is for using the grounds. We have to charge, just like if you have a building, you pay some annual rent for your building sitting on the land of the AMA or whichever. And that is relatively a small amount. So far, that has given us about...
Just for clarification, that rent is for the portion of the sea that the Jubilee field is sitting on.
That's right.
Okay. You see, when we are talking like technocrats, people are watching and they need to understand what we are talking about.
So if you have a land and your story building or your building is sitting on that land, you pay rent for that portion.
So we are talking about the portion that the rig is sitting on.
Ground rent.
Or the whole of the well. Is it the whole of the well or just
the portion?
Just the portion.
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's go.
And that has given us so far about 1.2 million US dollars, which translates into 2.3 million Ghana cedis. Well, so far that is where our money has come from. We also have gas receipts, which we budget for, but so far gas has not given us anything because we are yet to produce gas in commercial quantity.
Okay, so now we know what we have received. How have we disbursed them so far to the various funds?
Okay, the various funds, as we indicated, we have to take GMPC's portion out. And so far, we have given GMPC 625 million US dollars.
Of the 1.7 that we've earned.
Yes. We've given GMPC 625 million, and that translates into about 1.1 billion Ghana cedis. And this total amount, let's be very clear about how it has been used, because it's not all that goes into GMPC's pocket for them to use. We said that GMPC has equity financing costs and the net participating interest, net carried and participating interest. The net equity the equity financing cost is the amount of money that we have to pay for developing the oil field. But because we don't have money, we said earlier on, the partners pre-finance it. And therefore, when we get the money, we have to give the money to GMPC for them to reimburse.
So the 650 that you've paid them includes the money they must pay back to the partners.
That's right.
For the pre-financing.
That's right.
Plus interest on all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And it's about half as it is now. So far, the equity financing cost has been has amounted to about 311 million US dollars.
And the rest of the money, what do they do with it?
The rest of the money goes to GMPC for their budget, for their operations, and so on. That is about 340 million US dollars. And I think they have details of how they've used their money. That's why...
I'm not going to ask you about GMPC.
Thank you.
We had a very animated conversation at the end of our discussion last year. But okay, so we've got GMPC, Stabilization Fund. What is it and what goes into it?
Yes, so the rest of the money goes to Ghana, or government of Ghana.
Yes.
And it's made up of what we call the ABFA. That is the amount that goes into the budget to fund the budget, annual budget funding amount.
So it's part of the consolidated fund?
Yes, it's part of the consolidated fund. And so far, the amount of money that has gone to government is about 1.1 billion. 1.067 billion US dollars. That amounts to, translates to about 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. And the annual budget funding amount is...
Please, before you go on, clarify the exchange rate for us. Because most of us ordinary citizens, we are paying more than 2 cedis to the dollar.
It's difficult to get one exchange rate.
No, because the official rate. Just tell us the official rate.
Because as and when the money comes in, you change
do that at the late.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, but
you change it. So if the money comes in January, you have to use the January rate to change it.
It's a light touch because you see the monies you are mentioning, most of us we are paying more than 2 cedis.
But if you do all this, you get an average exchange rate of about 1.92.
Good.
About
so
1.92.
The 1.06 that the government got, how much went to Chop Now, how much went to stabilization, how much went to heritage?
Okay, I believe that the Chop Now is the ABFA. Yeah, if I should put it that way. 658 million has so far gone into the
recurrent budget, as you call it.
Not only recurrent, but maybe I'm understanding differently.
Recurrent expenditure in terms of using it now.
Or current budget.
Current.
Yeah,
yes.
current budget, yes. Right. So it's $658 million has gone into it. Mm-hmm. That translates into about 1.17 billion Ghana cedis. And the rest of the amount has gone into what we call the Ghana Petroleum Funds. Mm-hmm. The Ghana Petroleum Funds so far has received 409 million US dollars. That is about 757 million Ghana cedis. And the Ghana Petroleum Funds
makes up the stabilization
the Ghana Petroleum Funds are made up of the stabilization fund.
Which is supposed to do what?
The stabilization fund is supposed to support the budget in situations where we are not able to meet the projections that we've made for the oil revenue. For oil revenue.
Just for oil revenue.
Just for oil revenue, yeah.
Okay.
If you don't meet the target, government or the Minister of Finance is allowed by the law to go into the fund and take some portion, not everything but there's a formula for it. Take some portion of it to support the budget. But that also has to be approved by Parliament.
Okay.
He can't do that unilaterally and say that I've gone into the money, into the fund.
And then the Heritage Fund is what?
The Heritage Fund is
something for our children's children.
Yes, the Heritage Fund is supposed to be savings. We are saving for future generation, so that after we've exploited all the oil and there's no more oil production, our people who come after us, our children, our children's children, can use that money for development.
Good. Excellent. Now we have a very good idea. You have a few problems. You're beginning to outline that the GMPC is not getting as much as it should. Is that what you are suggesting?
No, I mean, I think that the law says not more than 55%. And so if you give them 30%, that is consistent with the law. So what I'm saying
you're
is
not
that
happy
the minister,
about the number?
Well, I think it's not about being happy, but as to whether what the GMPC is giving is what they should be given. The 40%, I think, should even go further down. Because the reason is that if you look at how GMPC has spent that money so far, I have a few issues.
But it says the government. It says not more than 55%. That's a very clever way of dribbling, isn't it?
Yes.
But it doesn't give a lower ceiling.
Yeah,
not less than.
Not less. Yeah.
It only says not more than.
Yes.
So it can even be zero.
It can even be zero.
It can even be zero. But your take is that even what they are being given is not.
It's too much.
It's too much
for the amount of work they have at the moment.
Okay, we've got a real director to tell us the theory. Now give us an analysis and commentary on what should have gone in and what has actually gone in, because we now need to get a direct correlation between what proportion should have gone into APFA, the stabilization, the heritage, and from your experience, whether what has gone in has matched what should have gone in, etc., etc. Then we get into the discussion about the uses and otherwise.
Yeah, I think there are a few problems which the ministry is trying to correct. For instance, in 2011, the interpretation of the law regarding how much went to the funds, the petroleum funds, was different from how we interpret it today. Okay. Indeed, the current interpretation is the most appropriate way to interpret the law. In 2011...
We haven't subjected it to the Supreme Court yet, and we are changing the interpretation.
Yes, yes. Because in 2011, the law says that when you have collected a quarterly annual budget funding amount, any excess collection over that goes to the petroleum funds.
Okay.
But what we did in 2011 was just to say 70% of what we collected, annual budget funding amount, and the 30% balance goes to the petroleum funds. And therefore, you will see that the petroleum funds received more money in 2011 than it received in 2012. Because in 2012, we were now religiously following the provisions of the law. And because the quarterly collections did not exceed the annual budget funding amount, no money was supposed to go to the petroleum funds. But the minister decided to put in some amount of money.
But no, I don't understand you.
Yes.
I thought the petroleum fund provides us with stability and future earnings.
Yes.
So I would rather be worried if no money went into it at all than an interpretation that says that, well, no money should go into it.
Yes, I mean, depending on your projections of how much goes to the budget, if your collections do not meet your projections, it means there is no excess, and therefore nothing will go to the petroleum funds if we follow religiously the provisions of the law. But in 2011, what the government did was just to say that 70% of what we collected should go to the budget and 30% to the fund.
I'm trying to get at whether you disagree with it, because from where I am sitting, I'll be inclined to take the government's line that whatever happens, we must put money away for future contingency.
That is what should be granted.
Yes.
But if you follow what the law provides, and then the government goes to make a higher projection, which they are not able to collect,
the reason why
you will not have any money transferred to the funds.
The reason why I'm worried about this issue of interpretation is that our government is budgeting to overspend.
Yes.
8.7 billion in 2012, 8.9 billion this year, 8.9 billion next year, 9 billion. So are we creating a situation, and Real Director, help me out, where we will find ourselves, because we are under collecting on revenue, not putting any money aside into the stabilization and heritage funds? Is that what we are seeing here? It's the Real Director.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with Mohammed. But that is one of the things that we are currently trying to do to review the law. Because for some of us, when we started collecting the oil money, we thought that the spirit of the law was to, as you also trying to interpret, that we should at all costs put some portion away for stabilization and also for heritage.
Before we chop
the rest.
But
yes.
The way the law seems like
it's the opposite.
So the law now is the opposite.
Yes.
So we must find the money to chop the 8.9 billion
and then
of
we put the rest.
expenditure that we have planned.
Yes.
And if we don't make enough, then we don't put anything away.
That's right.
That is the current law.
That is the current law. That's how we started interpreting it. And I think the public also felt that was it, that at all costs we should put some portion away for savings. But upon second thought, or when our attention was drawn to the law, that if you want to go straightly by the law, you have to go by a certain formula. And the formula says that whatever projection you do should be divided into 4 equal parts for each quarter. So when the revenue comes in and you achieve the quarter revenue, then the rest should go into the heritage and the stabilization fund. If you don't reach the quarterly projection, you don't put anything at all in the heritage and the stabilization fund.
At this juncture, I would like us to look at some comments from the public interest PIAC. Is it Public Interest Accounts?
And
PIAC,
yeah. Which actually looked at how we spent our 2011 oil money and put some comments and made some very interesting suggestions. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back and play an interview with Major Retired Kwaku of the PIAC.
In 2011, we observed, for instance, that the funds that were supposed to be put aside for future use, that is the stabilization fund and the heritage fund, it was appropriately funded. But when you come to 2012, we realized that there was a shortfall by as much as 82%. In our view, if Ministry of Finance were to apply the concept underlying or the policy underlying the distribution, then that kind of interpretation would not influence their way of doing things. We don't say that what they have done is entirely wrong, but if you look at the way that the underlying policy is supposed to operate, then applying that means the funds will be starved of funding. For instance, in 2012 alone, if you compare what was budgeted to be put aside in those two funds with what actually went in, there was an 82% shortfall. 82%. And if we continue with that, then there may come a time when those two funds are really being starved of funds. There is also the need for guidelines, proper guidelines, to be published on how those funds should be managed. We think that it's about time that the Minister of Finance and the Investment Advisory Committee worked together to come out with some guidelines. So in our 2012 report, we are recommending that those guidelines must come out. Otherwise, the instruments, Bank of Ghana will use their best efforts. You cannot fault Bank of Ghana for using their best efforts to manage those funds. But if there are specific guidelines as the law is stipulating. Then, if Bank of Ghana does not use those guidelines, you can hold them responsible. When it comes to the annual budget funding amount, the law requires that the Ministry of Finance spends those monies mostly on social investment projects, roads, and so on and so forth. What we have found, for instance, is that because funds are fungible, they are lumped together in the consolidated fund, and you cannot really trace whether, when it is said that this money was used here or there, you can actually identify which project matches which of the funds. So we have actually even recommended that the Ministry of Finance must indicate or create a special account to receive funds from the petroleum sector, so that we can easily follow up and trace to know where the monies have gone.
Good. So we're beginning to sense early teething troubles with the use of our oil money. But more importantly, this is now generally recognized that we need to tweak whatever laws there are to make things better. In the last 10 minutes of our discussion, I want us, first of all, because your center has studied this problem very critically, and you've raised a number of issues which you think must be addressed. I mean, some of the issues I've heard you raise is whether we are spreading ourselves too thin in the application of the resources in terms of the specialized areas. So in 5 minutes, raise the basic issues you think are wrong with how things are being done now, and then I'll get the real director without necessarily answering the questions directly, because there's a commitment, in a sense, to look at the whole thing, to see how the discussions that the minister promised in the budget this year will go to affect and address the issues that you want to raise now.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the law is very clear where we can spend the money. For instance, it gives the minister, I think section 21, gives the minister the discretionary power to decide not more than 4 areas for the spending of the annual budget funding amount. And this shall be reviewed, yes. Yeah. This shall be reviewed every 3 years. Okay. So in the last 3 years, the minister prioritized oil and gas infrastructure development, financing, what they called amortization, expenditure and amortization of oil and gas infrastructure loans. The second one was agri modernization. The third one is roads and other infrastructure. And then the fourth one is capacity building. This is where they have spent the money in the last 3 years. And they actually have retained these priorities for the next 3 years. But if you look at the 4 priority areas, in between them, then there are problems. For instance, the amount that has been allocated for road infrastructure, let's take 2011, 2012, for instance, were divided across 16 projects. And by 3 years, when we should have reviewed the next set of priorities for spending the annual budget funding amount, about 40% of the roads that received money from the annual budget funding amount were below 50% completion stage. Then you have 30%, which were above 50%, but below 70%. And so the question is, even though these roads were not receiving money entirely from the annual budget funding amount, because there are other GOG sources that are going to those projects, the question is, couldn't we have used the ABFA to complete a few projects, and then society can start benefiting from them? We did not learn our lessons.
Spreading ourselves thin.
Yes, we did not learn our lessons. And so in 2013, 100 million was allocated to Ministry of Roads and Transport. 48 of this was allocated to Highway Authority. And they spread 48 million, that is about $24 million, across 63 road projects, covering 2,134 kilometers. And so when we do the analysis of the average allocation, you are talking about $11,000. Yet the official cost of doing a kilometer of asphalt road is about $360 $100,000 US. And so if we follow this rate of disbursement, assuming you do not get revenue from other sources, each of these projects would take not less than 30 years to complete. And in our view, that doesn't amount to efficient spending of the money. In the case of urban roads, they were equally given 48 million Ghana cedis. And 9.6 million of that was used to pay arrears. Arrears resulting from what? Delay in disbursement, interest cost, because some of the contractors took loans from the banks. And so this money went to pay for work not done. And that doesn't amount to efficiency of spending the money. The third issue that we are worried about even has to do with the money that goes to the Ghana Gas Company. This is an issue I raised the other time.
You raised the other time, yeah.
Because what we are giving to the Ghana Gas Company should have gone to finance road infrastructure, educational infrastructure, etc. But we are using what is meant for social and economic development infrastructure to finance oil and gas infrastructure.
But remember what I told you last week?
Yes.
In the same way that our Jubilee partners are pre-financing our cost,
Yes.
can't we get government to accept that when we start getting revenue from Ghana gas,
Yes.
where the gas flows, that they'll pay this money back?
Yes, of course. As he said, we are projecting gas revenues for next year. And so Ghana Gas will bring some money. Therefore, it is government responsibility to capitalize Ghana Gas. But when you have put the law aside and you are allocating money inconsistent with what the law says, then there is a problem. If we want to capitalize them, let's regularize it because they will bring in revenues. At the time the law was passed, the Ghana Gas Company had not been established. And so the money which was to be earmarked for GMPC was for both oil and gas. And I have some data here.
What you are saying,
yes.
Before you bring your data,
yes.
What you are saying is an affliction
yes.
of expenditure by all governments where they just take money from anywhere and anywhere and pay for whatever.
Yes,
it
and that is not healthy enough.
No, it's not.
But the issue I want to say is that, in fact, before the Ghana Gas Company was established, the GMPC,
had responsibility.
Yes, the GMPC did about 15 kilometers of pipelines from the Jubilee field. And they were paying for it. They paid $28 million in 2011 and $5 million in 2012.
From their allocation?
From their allocation,
okay.
Which underscores the fact that they were actually responsible for gas sector development. And so having formed the Ghana Gas Company, the GNPC share should have also gone to capitalize gas because that was their responsibility.
Okay.
Now, when you have taken the annual budget funding amount, which the law says should go to finance development infrastructure, and about 13 of them are listed. There is no oil and gas infrastructure. You may be doing the right thing, but you are violating the law to do that. Okay. And this is why I'm saying that if you want to continue, regularize it.
You have a particular interest in underfunding of agriculture because I've seen you raise it elsewhere.
Yes, I was coming to that. Agriculture and education are the sectors countries have developed with, especially countries that are producing oil or other natural resources. Brazil, for instance, recently passed a new law that 70% of their royalty should go to education. Chile, Malaysia, and Indonesia prioritize agriculture. In our country, even though we are an agrarian economy, last year, only 4 million Ghana cedis was allocated to agricultural modernization. And yet, up to 111 million was allocated to capacity building.
Okay.
Now, capacity building has been an issue we are all concerned about because we want to build capacity for our people to participate in the industry. But when people do not know what type of capacity building this amount went to, then there is a problem.
You've raised some very fundamental points. These may be political decisions which even the real director, but I get a sense, listening to this year's budget statement, that some effort is being made, in a sense, to address some of the issues he has raised. Is that right? There's a promise to review the law.
Yes, but let me before I come.
We have about 2 or 3 minutes to
let
finish,
me say I'm not too sure whether the law has been violated in terms of the allocation, but I believe that it's a matter of policy and common sense that you should not spread things too thinly.
Yes.
And that is why in 2014 we've given specific targets for the 4 components that we're supposed to fund. In the previous years, we just did an omnibus allocation. But this time, we've indicated how much we will go to which sector. And I think that we are still learning. Let me make that very, very clear.
But in making the allocation to the sector, for roads and transport, for example, have you told them it's better to finish something than to spread yourself so thinly? Have you told them? Have you identified specific projects that we say at the end of 2014 would have finished?
Yeah, I think that for the roads sector, the roads that we have indicated are the Western Corridor roads. And it's supposed to be a matching fund for the CDB, the Chinese Development Bank loan that we have. So we are specific about what route the money will go into.
I think there are still others which are not specific.
Let me also indicate that the 2012, we've had a problem with this issue of capacity building. And I think there is an opportunity for me to talk about it.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I think that there has been a classification issue. And if you look at the things that we call capacity building, it's not only for training. There are so many other things, most of which are agriculture. For instance, the purchase of tractors and so on. All of them have gone into agriculture, but were classified under capacity building. So I think that we have to do should do the classification properly, so that we know what the monies were actually used for. And I can assure everybody that we have the numbers, we have the data on these issues, which will be published.
I think we should publish them.
Last word.
My last word is that there are symptoms of Dutch disease already here. You know, the exchange rate effect is here with us, which may not be fully attributed to oil, but the proceeds from the Eurobond is one. FDIs are coming in. And so this year, the cedi depreciated by 9% up to November. Last year, same time, it was around 17%. And so in real terms...
If you put your dollar in Europe, you get 0.5 of 1%. If you put it in Ghana, you get 22%.
Yeah. So in real terms, there has
and they know they'll get their money back because we are backing it with our own money.
They will. And so there is real currency appreciation, which is going to reduce our export, potential, because our exports have become internationally non-competitive. So increasingly, if the trend continues, then Ghana is in the Dutch disease.
I don't believe that Ghana is yet in any Dutch disease. And it's in the same way, because our output base is limited. It's very narrow. That is why we don't export much. And if you look at how much we export, I don't think that by depreciating the cedi so much will be beneficial to us. It will rather lead to high inflation. And even now that the cedi is depreciating, I think we are worried about it. We believe that there should be some stability. And I think that is why we are very worried about how we use the oil money. And we are saying that we use part of it for agriculture modernization, because agriculture is the mainstay of the economy in terms of employment. And I believe that
we allocate $4 million.
everybody wants to use the oil money properly. So we are still in the learning curve, and we are open to all suggestions. And that is why we have opened our doors to people who want to suggest, so that when we review the law, we will meet the aspirations of all Ghanaians.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You have illuminated this discussion and taught us a lot. Now, what is the Dutch disease? As I said, the Dutch disease, it afflicts countries which make a lot of money from oil, but don't seem to be getting their economies straightened out. They seem to be getting into more trouble as they get more oil, because that money tends not to be used where it should be used for the benefit of the people. But at least from this discussion, we've learned something. We know how much oil wealth we have. We know what it's being used for. Thankfully, we are beginning to see the signs, and seeing those signs of weaknesses, we are beginning to plug the holes. Government has promised a review of the law, and we hope that that review will bring us into better management, better resources, better wealth for all Ghanaians. Thank you.